David Parker Ray was born November 6, 1939, in Belen, New Mexico. Over decades, he became known to investigators and the public as the Toy Box Killer, a name that came from the soundproofed cargo trailer he converted into a private torture chamber behind his home near Elephant Butte, New Mexico. Inside that trailer, he kept a large and horrifying array of tools, restraints, medical instruments, and devices that he used to kidnap, control, and brutalize women. Ray's crimes were revealed in 1999 when one of his victims, Cynthia Vigil, also known as Cynthia Jaramillo, escaped. She had been abducted from Albuquerque and held in Ray's trailer for 3 days. When Ray left for work, she found keys left within reach, freed herself from heavy chains and a steel collar, and ran, barefoot and bloodied, to a nearby trailer where someone called police. Her brave escape led authorities to Ray's property and to the trailer that would become central evidence in a case that shocked the region. What investigators found in the trailer was deliberate, methodical cruelty. Ray had soundproofed the interior and installed heavy locks, pulleys, straps, shackles, and a modified obstetric table chair with straps and a ceiling mirror so captives could be forced to watch their own abuse. He kept tapes he recorded describing threats and methods. He kept journals, and he amassed what investigators later cataloged as hundreds of items, jewelry, clothing, and personal effects that may have come from victims. Ray told tapes that he sometimes drugged those he released with barbiturates to fragment their memory, then abandoned them on remote roads. Survivors' stories, taken together, give a pattern of abduction and prolonged torment. Ray would sometimes recruit or be assisted by others: his girlfriend, Cynthia Lee Hendy, his daughter, Glenda Jean Jessie Ray, and at times other associates. Several women later identified Ray and recounted being lured to his trailer after drinks were spiked or after being offered rides. Some were held for days, others for weeks or months. Many described being bound, repeatedly drugged, and subjected to graphic sexual and physical torture. Although Ray and some accomplices later implicated him in dozens of murders, no bodies were ever conclusively tied to him. Ray's journals and confessions hinted at as many as 60 victims across years. Investigators searched lakes, canyons, and remote properties and deployed cadaver dogs, but the lack of recoverable remains left many questions unanswered. The FBI later released hundreds of photos of items seized in the investigation, asking the public to help identify owners or relatives. Small pieces of someone's life that might lead to answers. The case contains a number of named survivors whose accounts were crucial. Cynthia Vigil's escape is the clearest turning point. Angelica Montano later reported being abducted under false pretenses, taken to the trailer, abused, and released. Her early report allegedly received little follow-up. Kelly Garrett was identified from a videotape seized in 1996. She later surfaced alive in Colorado and told of being held and abused for 2 days before Ray drove her home and lied to her husband about where he had found her. Each account added pieces to investigators' understanding, even when evidence which prosecutors hoped to use was limited by court rulings or legal strategy. In 1999, the FBI and local law enforcement conducted an extensive search of Ray's property and surrounding areas. Investigators searched lakes, canyons, and remote properties and deployed cadaver dogs, but the lack of recoverable remains left many questions unanswered. The FBI later released hundreds of photos of items seized in the investigation, asking the public to help identify owners or relatives. Ray was arrested and, facing a series of prosecutions, eventually agreed to a plea deal in 2001. He pleaded guilty to a string of charges related to the abduction and sexual torture of 3 women and was sentenced to 24 years in prison. As part of the proceedings, several accomplices were convicted or entered pleas. Cindy Hendy testified and was later sentenced. She served time and was released on parole years later. And Ray's daughter Jessie faced charges and took a no-contest plea that resulted in a reduced sentence. Some trials were complicated by evidentiary rulings. Judges in separate proceedings limited how much of the material from Ray's trailer, including the tapes on which he described tortures, could be used in certain trials. Prosecutors argued that trying the cases separately weakened their ability to show a pattern of abuse. Defense attorneys argued that the trailer and tapes reflected fantasy or consensual activity. In one retrial, a jury convicted Ray on all counts related to Kelly Garrett. In other cases, the weight of evidence and legal maneuvering shaped outcomes differently. while Ray served his sentence. Investigators continued to hunt for missing people who might be connected to his crimes. The FBI's 2011 release of hundreds of photos from the Ray investigation was an effort to generate new leads and to give families a chance to spot items that might belong to their loved ones. To this day, some victims remain unidentified, and many families still wait for answers. Ray died on May 28, 2002, of a heart attack while at a correctional facility, and before he could be fully interrogated in other pending inquiries. His death closed the chance to press him further for the locations of alleged victims, and for many, the case remains an unfinished accounting. Out of this horror, survivors took action. Cynthia Vigil, the woman whose escape exposed the case, went on to co-found Street Safe New Mexico, a non-profit that works with people living on the street, including sex workers, to provide harm reduction, resources, and support. Her advocacy turned personal trauma into ongoing community action, helping others avoid the situations that made certain people vulnerable and pushing for better responses to reports of violence. The Ray case left a difficult legacy. It's a story of extreme cruelty, but also of survival and of the sometimes slow machinery of justice. It exposed failures, missed tips, victims who weren't believed, evidence that couldn't conclusively tie Ray to suspected murders, and it showed the importance of believing survivors and of cross-agency cooperation in long, complicated investigations. For the families of the missing, and for those who survived, the questions left behind remain painful and unresolved. If this story has affected you, please consider sharing it to raise awareness for survivors and missing persons. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, contact local emergency services. For survivors of sexual assault and those seeking support, organizations such as RAIN in the U.S. can help with resources and hotlines, and local groups like Street Safe New Mexico offer targeted support for people at extreme risk. Thank you for watching and for helping keep these stories, and the people behind them, from being forgotten.